Good afternoon, class. Today, the learning intention is to be able to use square roots and cube roots to solve equations and simplify expressions. This is section 2-1, beginning unit 2, roots. All right, let's get into it. All right, so let's talk about what a square root is. So, as you can read here, a square root of a number is one of its two equal factors. Remember, a factor is just a number that multiplies, right? So it is what number will multiply by itself to equal the number you're trying to find the square root of, right? So for instance, let's just go down here to the example because I think that makes it super simple, right? 25, the square root of 25 would be 5 because 5 multiplies by itself to equal 25, right? 25, or 5 times 5 equals 25. Therefore, the square root of 25 is 5. All right. Here we're going to talk about perfect squares. So perfect squares are just going to be numbers that when you take the square root of them, their square root is a nice whole number. So you'll see like the square root of 1 is 1. So 1 is a perfect square because 1 times 1 is 1. 4 is a perfect square because the square root of 4 is 2, right? And you can see that because 2 times 2 is 4. And we can go down the list. 9 is a perfect square because the square root of 9 is 3, and 3 times 3 is 9. You can see where this is going. And this will go on and on forever for any rational number. I meant to say every whole number on that last slide, by the way. So, you also need to know that every square root, right, has a positive and negative root. So, and we'll see how that works right here. 3 times 3 is 9, so 3 is the square root of 9. But negative 3 times negative 3 is also 9, right? Because a negative times a negative is a positive. So negative 3 is also a square root of 9. So 9 and all other numbers have two square roots, a positive and a negative, all right? That is important to remember. It is important to know though, right? Most situations we ask for in class, we will just want the principal or positive square root, all right? You can always determine which one we are looking for by looking at the question. If you don't see any symbol in front of the square root, well, they want the positive root. If you see a negative sign in front of the square root, well, they want the negative root. And if you see both positive and negative signs in front of the square root sign, well, they want both roots, all right? So just pretty easy convention to remember. Make sure you jot that down in your notes. All right, so here is an example. So they're asking you to find the square root of 64. Well, to do that, you would just have to determine what number multiplied by itself is 64. I highly recommend using a calculator. For most of you, you would type in 64, and then you would press the square root button. It looks like that. And when you hit enter, it should tell you 8, because 8 times 8 is 64. Now, once again, here is a slide explaining clearly, showing clearly what we just did on that last page. So if you want to pause it and jot this down, please do so. So this is a check problem for you to solve. I'd like you to pause the video right here, and then you can try to do this one on your own. Pretty simple. Just use your calculator, and then resume the video to see the answer. All right. So the square root of 225 is 15, because 15 times 15 is 225. All right. So here they actually want us to use square roots to solve a problem with order of operations, right? So you have to remember order of operations. So, right, PEMDAS, for a lot of you, please remember addition and subtraction are both equal, multiplication and division are both equal, depends on which one's first, left to right. But then parentheses and exponents are always, important. So let's do that. So take care of what's in the parentheses first. We got to do exponents. 6 times 6, well, that's going to equal 36 minus 11, right? Well, 36 minus 11 is 25. So the square root of 25 plus 3.5. Well, now I'm just going to use my calculator, right? I'm going to hit 25, square root button, and that's going to tell me that 5 times 5 would equals 25. So the square root of 25 is 5. And finally, I'm left with 3.5 times 5. Well, that's simple addition. You can use your calculator or your brain, and you should get 8.5. All right, let's check our work and see what we did on the next page. Once again, if I move too fast or my chicken scratch is hard for you to read, please just pause the screen, take a look at what we did and what the answer was, and get that down in your notes. All right, here's an order of operations problem for you to solve on your own. Pause the video, and then when you hit resume, see if you got it right. Your answer for this problem should have been 3. This big ugly problem comes down to just a simple old 3. Now, if you ever have any trouble solving or you don't understand how a check problem works, please bring it to me or Ms. Franklin in class and we can explain it to you, all right? All right, so here we have to learn about taking the square root of a negative number. And it's pretty simple. You can't. So the square root of negative 16 is going to be either air or undefined or something along those lines, because right, no number times itself can be negative. A negative number times a negative number is positive. A positive number times a positive number is positive. The only way you can get a negative number through multiplication requires 2 separate numbers, so squaring is just not possible. So anytime you see that negative sign inside the radical, just know your answer is undefined or air. By all means, please read this description, but it's very long and a lot of words to just say you can't take the square root of a negative number. All right, it's going to be undefined or air, so don't stress it. Now, this is an important slide because you have seen both of these already in your notes, and they are not the same thing. So please take a second to think about what the difference between the square root of negative 16 and the negative square root of 16, right? You can do this one. You cannot do this one. This would just be negative 4, right? They want that negative root. What negative number times itself would give you 16? Negative 4. No number times itself could ever give you negative 16, though. That's the difference. All right, so I want you to try to take the square root of a negative number on your calculator, and please see what it says, and please understand what your answer needs to be. All right, try this on your own. Once again, here's your answer. Please take the time to read it. All right, so now we're going to get into cube roots. All right, cube roots are different because they are going to be about 3 equal factors, right? Whereas square roots were about 2, so a number multiplied by itself twice. So 4 times 4 equals 16. This cube roots are about numbers multiplied by themselves 3 times. So 2 times 2 times 2 equals 8. Therefore, 2 is a cube root of 8. Same thing down here, right? Negative 216. The cube root of negative 216 is negative 6, because negative 6 times negative 6 times negative 6 is negative 216. And some of you might be already noticing, wait, you can have negative cube roots? Yes, cube roots can be negative. Very much unlike square roots, cube roots can be negative. All right, this is actually a pretty helpful little chart. Just please take the time to just get this down in your notebook. I recommend highly jotting this down. All right, so here, let's just get into practice problems because I always say doing is the best way to learn. So what I want you to do is find your calculator, find your cube root button. It may be a button that looks like this, a little X. in a root, right? If your calculator has that button, you need to punch 3 first, then the root button, then your number 125, and enter, right? So when you do that, you should get the number 5, right? That should be your answer because 5 times 5 is 25, and 25 times 5 is 125. Therefore, 5 cubed would equal 125. That's all there is to it, right? This is very heavy calculator work, so please make sure you're practicing your calculator skills. They are skills you need to know and have come fast testing, all right? Please practice. What's good? Here's a nice, simple, very clearly laid out version of what you just heard. Please pause it if you need to and take your notes. So, some of you may have a different calculator for this check problem. Before you do it, I would like to say, if you use one of the calculators like we use in class, to do cube roots, you will need to hit the second button, which is the big green button in the top left corner of your calculator, and then you are going to hit the 0 key, the number 0. And if you pay attention, in tiny green letters above 0, there is actually a cube root symbol. So when you hit second, it actually activates all of those functions. So you want to hit second 0 after typing in your number. So for everybody in class that is taking these notes, you need to do 64, second button, 0 key, right? And equal, and you should get the answer 4. They'll probably show that on the next slide, but I just wanted to walk you through those calculator button presses because I think it is wildly important that you know how to use your calculators. So, yes, this is a negative cube root, but I believe you can handle this. This is just calculator butt work again. So, type in the number, hit that second 0, and then tell me what your answer is. It'll be on the next slide. So if you inputted this into your calculator correctly, you should have gotten -3, because -3 times -3 is 9, and 9 times -3 is -27. Therefore, -3 is the cube root of -27. All right, last check problem after this. You're done with notes. So pause this, try to get this problem done on your own again, and if you are successful, I think you know how to use your calculator well enough to be successful in this section. Have a good one.